everyone, today I will be discussing the synovial joints and its 6 types. Synovial joints are the most common type of joint in the body. A key structural characteristic for a synovial joint that is not seen at fibrous or cartilaginous joints is the presence of joint cavity. This fluid-filled space is the site at which the articulating surfaces of the bones contact each other. At synovial joints, the articular surfaces of bones are covered with smooth articular cartilage. This gives the bones of a synovial joint the ability to move smoothly against each other, allowing for increased joint mobility. Synovial joints are further classified into 6 different categories on the basis of the shape and structure of the joint. The shape of the joint affects the type of movement permitted by the joint. These joints can be described as plane or gliding joint, hinge, pivot, condyloid, saddle, or ball and socket joints. So the first one is gliding or plane joints. A gliding joint is a common type of synovial joint formed between bones that meet at flat or nearly flat articular surfaces. It allows the bones to glide past one another in any direction along the plane of the joint, up and down, left and right, and diagonally. For example, here is my improvised model for gliding or plane joint. You can move left and right, up and down, or diagonally. The range of motion is limited in these joints and does not involve rotation. Planar joints are found in the carpal bones in the hand and the dorsal bones of the foot, as well as between vertebrae. So the second one is hinge joints. In a hinge joint, protective cartilage covers the bones, and a thick gel called synovial fluid lubricates them, allowing them to move without rubbing against one another. All hinge joints also contain muscles, ligaments, and other tissues that stabilize the joint. Hinge joints are a type of joint that functions much like the hinge of a door, allowing bones to move in one direction back and forth with limited motion along their planes. So, here is the example. For example, shoulder, hip, elbow, and knee. Therefore, a hinge joint is defined as a joint between two bones that allows movement only in one plane. For instance, human fingers, toes, elbows, knees, and ankles contain hinge joints. The third one is pivot joint. A pivot joint is a freely movable joint that allows only rotary movement around a single axis. The moving bone rotates within a ring that is formed from a second bone and a joining ligament. It consists of a rounded end of one bone fitting into a ring formed by one another bone. So, this is my improvised model of pivot joint. So, this structure allows rotational movement as the rounded bone moves around its own axis. So an example of a pivot joint is a joint of the first and second vertebrae of the neck that allows the head to move back and forth. This joint of the wrist that allows the palm of the hand to be turned up and down is also a pivot joint. So the fourth one is condyloid joints. It consists of an oval-shaped end of one bone fitting into similarly oval-shaped hollow of one bone. This is also sometimes called an ellipsoidal joint. So this type of joint allows angular movement along two axes, as seen in the joints of the wrist of fingers, which can move both side to side and up and down. So here is my example of condyloid joint. So the wrist joint, which is referred to as radiocarpal joint, connects and serves as a transition point between the forearm and hand. The condyloid joint, is the second most movable joint in the body. An example can be found the articulated hands between the metacarpals of the hand and the phalanges of the fingers. So the fifth one is saddle joints. It allows angular movements similar to condyloid joints but with a greater range of motion. It is a type of synovial joint that allows articulation by reciprocal reception. So here is my improvised model for saddle joint. Both bones have concave, convex articular surfaces which interlock like two saddles opposed to one another. Saddle joints allow movement with 2 degrees of freedom much like condyloid joints. They allow flexion or extension, abduction or adduction, and therefore also allow circumduction. Unlike ball and socket joints, saddle joints do not allow axial rotation. An example of saddle joint is the thumb joint, which can move back and forth and up and down, but more freely than the wrist or fingers. So the last one is ball and socket joints. It possesses a rounded, ball-like end of one bone fitting into a cup-like socket of one another bone. This organization allows the greatest range of motion as all movement types are possible in all directions. So here is my example of ball and socket joint. Ball and socket joint is a type of joint in which the rounded surface of a bone moves within a depression on another bone, allowing greater freedom of movement than any other kind of joint. It is the most highly developed in the large shoulder and hip joints of mammals, including the humans, in which provides swing for the arms and legs in various directions and also spin of those limbs upon the more stationary bones. So, these 6 types of synovial joints allows our body to move in variety of ways.